Thanks, guys, for turning up. What a great turnout. Fantastic. I moved for all my sins back to London, to London, about a year and a half ago. So it's always nice coming back and seeing that there is such an interest in the tech being built here still. And that's obviously being led by amazing places like Accela and then some of these events like the Giancarlo's putting on. So yeah, really great to see. A couple of points. I don't understand how anyone in that Google Shoreditch office is doing any work. Long gone are the days of Silicon Valley tech companies which have their nice ping pong, their table football, which everyone hyped up about. Now it's all about AI drones and fun stuff like that. And I was really nervous when you were talking about the governance board of AI. I was thinking back to the Supreme Court that were investigating TikTok and started asking them, when you're connected to the broadband, are you accessing the internet though? And I was like, oh, bloody hell, here we go. No, it's really great. The work's being done is fantastic. I'm a bit of a utopian when it comes to all things tech. I like the idea that in the future, we can live off the economy that we've built, which is run on tech and is automated, and AI helps us get things done quicker. I actually believe that it will replace some jobs, but that's fine because then it opens up other jobs, us to follow our hobbies, our interests. And I think that's a really exciting thing. But I'm not here to talk to you about all that because otherwise we'll be here all day. I'm here to talk to you about the environment because that's my background. So I'm Thomas Panton. I'm a two-time venture-backed founder. After a stint at Greenpeace, being the world's largest independent environmental organization for the better half of a decade, I jumped ship, came to Norwich, studied a master's in climate change and international development, and started my first tech startup, which went on to be backed by the world's largest pre-seed venture capital fund, being Techstars. And I think for me, one of the most important things around this is when we think about tech, it's about the impacts of the environment, but whether it is the tech's responsibility or whether there are other issues at play. Also, at the moment, I've sort of decided that I like AI and I've started a project in AI too. So I'm working on a startup which, with my co-founder Alyssa, who is head of AI at M&G, we're working on a project which streamlines investor deal flow and democratizes founder feedback instantly, saving hours a week for VCs and giving founders much more opportunity to raise money. But today we're talking about AI and we're talking about the environment. Now there's a lot of hype, and rightly so, but with that hype gets louder and louder voices of concern about the impact that it's happening. But the question is, how bad is AI itself? That's what we need to address as a conversation. But let's start with some context. Anyone watch Silicon Valley, the TV show at all? Oh dear, wrong audience. Okay. Basically, Silicon Valley is this really funny sitcom about a startup in Silicon Valley and all the ins and outs of trying to be a startup founder, VC-backed, yada, yada. But the reason that I've got this up here is because AI runs on the same thing that the internet runs on. It uses data centers. Data centers use servers, and all our data, which you think is stored in some atmospheric cloud, is in these data centers, and it uses a fuck ton of energy and a lot of water, as our friends at Google will know. And I think what's really important is that back in the day, that wasn't always the case. So in this Silicon Valley show, this guy, Gilfroy, who's like this mad whiz developer, really smart, he builds his own servers in his garage and he calls it Anton. Now, Anton eventually blows up because of the amount of data that it's holding, and it burns down in his garage, and it's an absolute nightmare. So what we've moved on to in the world are these huge data centers, which are run and looked after by lovely people called John. Now, bless John, he's a little bit boring, but he does the job. He keeps our data safe. He makes sure that these aren't burning down. But the problem is with these data centers is they're hungry. They're really hungry. Now, in 2021, data centers consumed over 840 million liters of water. And AI infrastructure specifically is expected to consume 6 times more water than the whole of Denmark as a country in the next few years. So you can understand when we're already dealing with freshwater shortages, we're dealing with some states in America which are having companies actually bottle up the fresh water and sell it back to them. This is a problem. But also, data centers consume energy. In 2021, they consumed almost as much energy as the UK. But by 2026, the AI, led by AI, is expected to double its energy consumption to 1,000 tetrawatts an hour, which is actually going to lead us to have energy consumption, which is the same as implementing the 6th largest country in the world, again, just as AI, on its own. Now, just imagine that. That's Japan. If we just created Japan again and just emitted the same amount of emissions that Japan emits, this is a huge problem. And in fact, to put that into perspective, it goes China, USA, India, Russia, Japan, and then AI. So, this is something that we're consistently thinking about in the environmental sector, but also something that we should all be considering as we build AI tools and think about how that's being used. The problem being, of course, for those who don't know the context of why that's a problem, is that data centers still run off fossil fuels. And the correlation between fossil fuels and human-accelerated climate change are undeniable. We have a climate catastrophe on our doorstep. We saw this with the LA fires recently. We've seen it with the fires and flooding in Spain. And this is only going to get worse the more fossil fuels we use. And of course, whilst data centers continue to use that, we have a problem in that we are fueling our own demise by developing more tech. Or at least that's the rhetoric that I meant to tell you as someone who worked at Greenpeace and is an eco-warrior and has worked for over a decade in the climate sector. But I don't believe that. Also, just a side note, there are 3 images in this deck which weren't AI generated. Gilfroy, with his server base Panton, which is a screenshot from Silicon Valley. John in his big data center. And this one, because I don't need to generate an AI image of carbon emissions because it's real. It's happening right now. And you can see it there. Everything else is done by lovely Google Gemini's little integration I've seen on Google Slides now, which I was really happy to find. So should we be worried? That's what it really comes down to. This is what you're probably all thinking after that horrific introduction. We're cooked. That's it. That's the end. We might as well give up now. But before you settle your mind there, I like to challenge people, and I particularly like to challenge climate activists because I am one, and think about, is it AI's responsibility for the emissions that it consumes? Surely, of course, the intensity of consumption is real, but it's the infrastructure that AI runs on which is the problem, not AI itself. And the second question is, we talk a lot about in the climate movement about per capita emissions, which is basically if you took the total emissions of a country and divided it by the number of people in that country, how bad is it really per person? So for example, everyone loves to talk about China, but actually their per capita emissions are much, much less than the UK, the US, and other countries like that. AIs, if you considered the per capita emissions based on how many people and how many businesses use AI, it's tiny. Really, really, really small. So again, it's not about looking necessarily at AI itself, but the infrastructure it is built on. So let's stick on that point. Surely the whole point of the green transition is that we're not meant to be stunting the growth of technological development, but we're meant to be pushing for change on the infrastructures that have existed for hundreds of years since the industrial revolutions. This is what we should be arguing already. So we should use those statistics that AI is going to be the 6th largest country of emissions in the world, but we should use that to fuel our fire, for lack of a better phrase, to move to this more than this, where we currently are. And don't get me wrong, there's been great movement in renewable energy, but the way that grids work and energy systems work and battery storage works, it simply isn't efficient enough right now for us to be able to run all of these data centers off renewable energy. And it certainly doesn't help with the cooling of water, which is also a massive problem for these data centers. So actually, if we started to invest the time and money and energy that we were chasing the shiny things like AI into solving the infrastructure that would allow us to use AI without worry, we might actually be in a much better place. But another question is, instead of fighting AI is here. It's not going anywhere. As I've said, I'm bullish about it actually replacing certain jobs that really should be done automatically and realistically can lead us to go into jobs that we enjoy more. No one wants to be doing manual work. No one wants. I refuse to believe that an admin assistant wants to be going for an Excel sheet and choosing the number to copy and paste. No one wants to do that. AI can do that. So why don't we work with it? And actually we utilize its power to find the solution to the very problem that we are faced with. Now, I keep looking at this because I'm excited to come to the bits of some crazy insights that will settle that question, which is AI is already being used to map destructive dredging of sand and chart emissions of methane, which is much more damaging than carbon emissions. It's already doing that much faster than we were ever doing it before. AI has been trained to measure the changes in melting ice caps 10,000 times faster than any human ever could. And this not only helps us, of course, map where it's melting, but that gives us the ability to model and predict what accelerating climate change is going to have on the impacts of our oceans and ultimately our coastal areas, something which we should care about in Norfolk, of course. AI, satellite images, and ecology expertise are being used to map deforestation across Brazil and other countries such as Indonesia. There's a company in Edinburgh called Space Intelligence, which is working in more than 30 countries, has mapped more than 1 million hectares of land from space using satellite data and then using AI to feed that into models and systems to predict and help people who are affected by these fires and by these deforestation. One which I'm a big fan of, for those of you who do know me in the room, my last startup was in the circular economy. I dealt with ethical consumer products. We have a huge problem of overconsumption across the world, but particularly in the West. And waste is actually a huge producer of methane and other greenhouse gases. It's actually 16% of global greenhouse gases come from waste. And Grey Parrot, which is a software startup based in London, has developed an AI software which can analyze waste processing and recycling facilities to help them recover and recycle more waste material. Get this though, the company has tracked 32 billion waste items across 67 categories in 2022 alone, and it identified 86 tons of material on average that could be recovered but is currently being sent to landfill. None of these things could be done so quickly without AI. And yet these are the things which are help solve the climate crisis, rather than damage the climate further. So I like to say, instead of us just shunning the fact that it is intense on carbon, its carbon intensity is high, instead, why don't we use the AI to find solutions to that very same problem, which we've been struggling with. And a good example of this is at UEA, where I did my master's. You've got the Tyndall Centre for Climate Research in London, at Imperial College London, where I mentor climate tech startups. You've got the Grantham Institute for Climate Research. And these researchers drastically need help with modeling for their climate scenarios, for their solutions, and for their alerts and various other things that go out to governments and public health authorities across the world. And interestingly, there's a founder that I know personally in the biotech industry who raised a lot of money for a company using AI, which could find the issues within models and research and then present solutions to those in a matter of seconds, whereas usually it would take days, weeks, and sometimes months for a researcher to be able to find those same issues. Now imagine if you could take that out of biotech and you could implement it into climate tech and climate solutions, how much faster we could solve the climate crisis with AI rather than us pushing against it. So is AI bad for the environment? Not explicitly AI itself, and we shouldn't use that rhetoric. It puts strain on an already strained system and an already strained infrastructure. Absolutely, we should question that. But this is a system that we need to be pushing off fossil fuels anyway. It wasn't like these issues didn't exist before AI. These have just further exemplified them. But equally, it's an absolute must, as we've just discussed, that we utilize AI to solve these problems. And one of the great things I think Giancarlo mentioned earlier is that you've got new models coming out like DeepSeek, which are 30 times more efficient in carbon use, in energy use, than current models out there. So imagine if we keep innovating, you can make it less carbon intense, and you can solve the very same problems that make it carbon intense in the first place. I'm going to wrap up here because I've got 10 seconds. I'm impressed. I actually kept on time. Jesus Christ. That is a surprise, I'll tell you guys. Right, anyway. With any AI, it depends what prompt we use. And there are a number of things that we can take, actions that we can take as individuals to help with that transition and to stop AI being so damaging when it's not really AI's fault. The first one is change your bank. You know, since the Paris Agreement, banks have continued to fund the climate crisis. For example, Barclays has invested over £230 billion in fossil fuels since we've all agreed to cut fossil fuels out. We've now gone over the 1.5 degrees limit because of these banks' financing. So use services like Mothertree or Bank.Green to find what a more sustainable banking alternative is. But to make it nice and easy for you, I've done the research. So use Nationwide, use the Cooperative Bank, or if you really want to be an all-green warrior, go for Triodos. Switch your energy provider. Energy providers like Octopus Energy are leading the way with renewable energy, but that's not what we really care about, is it? We care about customer service because British Gas are shit. So what you really want to do is move to the one that's been rated consistently the best for customer service, which is Octopus Energy. And then you're doing two good things in one, helping yourself not get angry at the person on the phone and also making sure you're doing green things. And finally, because time is up, pressure your company to do the same. We run, we're employed by, we lead, we invest in companies all over the world. And it's our ability to make sure that businesses which currently lead the climate crisis can be part of that change too. So get your companies that you work for, the companies that you run, the companies you invest in, to switch their banks, switch their energy providers, and keep using AI to solve the world's biggest problems. Thank you.